Welcome back to a very British space program. Getting interrupted there by one of the Kerbals. So, in this episode, we're going to continue where we left off and try and go back into orbit. Right, you find us back in the workshop in the VAB, and we're going to fix this Red Frog 1C and complete the mission from the last episode that I was cheated out of. So there we go. We're going to stick our payload, our sounding rocket payload thing that I need to have. We're going to stick that onto the top there, and at this point I was thinking to myself, that's a lot of weight, that's a lot of extra mass behind a small craft, and I started to wonder whether I should actually make a wider craft just for this one. However, that would have meant tooling wider wider tanks and everything, or having a bulbous nose on the end, and these things lead to madness. So in the end, I reshaped it as much as I could. Decided, you know what, we're gonna sit it down as far as possible, because I'm trying to keep the weight down. I do not want this craft turning over and burning its parachutes off. So you'll see that I actually removed the airfoil fin parts of it, because in reality, too much. So while that's building, we're also going to look at doing a mission for supersonic flight. So we've got 636 meters per second between 12 and 15 kilometers for 3 minutes. Well, I think we have the craft for that, don't we? Let's bring out the Frisk, I think. There we go. So Carol is flying again. It's an easy one. We just got to get up to speed and just hold it there. And I think potentially this might be the limit of this craft. I actually thought we were going to be able to go on and on with it. I'm not sure if these supersonic flights get faster and faster, but 636 is quite a high speed, and you'll see the engines are actually starting to overheat at that speed, so you have to be careful of that. There is a heating element to that. We're also, by holding that height for that at that altitude, that amount of speed for that amount of time, you can see we're starting to get heating on our cockpit as well, which is again a problem, because that cockpit is it seems to be quite flimsy. So we completed that task, but I would think that we probably are going to retire the Frisk after this one. We're just checking to make sure what the temperature was in the cockpit. Again, as I said in the last episode, this craft is pretty much on its last legs. We had the nose come off its sort of sister craft the earlier, which was interesting, the White Arrow or 2B. So the Farley and the Frisk may be coming to a very big end right now. I think we've learned everything we needed to learn about the shape of wing, controls, things like that, and even landing with parachutes. So we're going to go back to space. We're going to go back to space and we're going to stay there. That's right, we're going to put a satellite up there. To do it, we are going to build a new craft. We're going to build the Red Princess 4. That's right, we've gone through 3, we're on to 4. We're taking that Red Maiden up a stage and we're going to just modify it a bit. We're going to give it a bit of RCS. We're actually going to vent HTP and so forth, because we're carrying it anyway. We're going to vent that. We're also, and if you notice there, the engines look different. We're going to use Spectre engines. So these are engines that were designed around the same time as the Gamma engines. They have similar thrust. The later versions of them have a longer burn time, but these ones have a slightly higher thrust than the relative Gamma, the Gamma 301, for about the same burn time, maybe a little bit more. So we're going to just put together a craft with them. So our first stage is pretty much a Red Maiden that's had its engine swapped out for a Gamma, and you'll notice on the top there, if you get a quick look at it while I'm doing it, I've actually put a dead weight on the top, which I always use when I'm designing craft, just to give me an idea of what I'm doing. So we've got one engine, then we've got 3 engines, and then I had a look at some of the engines we're going to get when we get orbital, and I decided on a tank size that was going to be suitable in case I decide to use them, reuse of tank sizing and everything. But to get that tank size and the rest of the craft to the correct delta V for orbit, and yet again checking the sizes, checking all these scales, is going to require quite a lot of Spectre or Gamma engines. I think I use Spectre engines. Gammas. I think we're looking at sort of 16 of them. Yeah, it looks a bit like an N1 on the small side of an N1 though. But I think we've gone a bit crazy with engine clusters. To remember though, the Black Arrow did actually have 8 engines on its first stage, so we're being sort of, it's the sort of thing the British did. They did cluster engines on their rockets, so there we go. And we're going to get a nice red colour scheme for the Red Princess of 4A, and let's move on a bit, shall we? So we're going to launch the Red Frog. So we've got to get up to speed and we've got to come back. That's all we got to do. We've tried this before. We know it works without the extra payload. Will it work with the extra payload? Well, we're going to find out. It's yeah. It's a craft that is annoying me now. It's a set of tasks that are annoying me because I feel as though we're on the brink of actually getting away from this sort of stuff. It's the this is the sort of work that the actual Black Knight was originally designed for. It was designed to go into suborbital flight and then re-enter, and it was to measure the damage to warheads and shielding and things like that. But we don't have heat shields at the moment, which is a problem. So I'm actually doing this probably faster than I should. It's probably further on than I should, but I find it very odd that we are putting craft into orbit. But yeah, we have a bit of a spin with the vapor and the feed lines there because we got a turn on the engine just to get to the top. We go into a random roll. It's not actually that bad. It's just sped up considerably here because I think it's 4 times plus 3 times, so we're looking at 12 times faster. We come through the atmosphere, and yeah, luckily I left the actual I left one of the fairings on, which seems to have protected it through the atmosphere, and we got rid of it through heating. So that was maybe lucky. I am not proud of this flight, but it completed a mission. Some of you may say, nope, that doesn't count, do it again. I think we have learned a lot from this craft, even if it's not the things we should have been learning. We have learned that we are not ready yet to return things from orbit. We are far, far, far from that, and we are actually barely able to do this one. I think this is very much a British bodge job, but I'm quite proud of it. We managed to figure our way through it. I will point out I did not sim this, so yeah, surprise. Right, X-planes high. Let's get that done, shall we? Yeah. Should we do an X-planes high? Yeah, let's do an X-planes high. Yeah, get some money, because we'll need to. At this point, we're actually training up our. We're building up our Red Princess. So it's just a matter of building up doing contracts while waiting for that to happen. And our launch pad and our buildings, our VAB is not as advanced as it really needs to be, I think, at this point for going orbital. I think this took over sort of 3-4 months to build this craft for the orbital flight. So anyway, this, I believe, is probably, most definitely, and I know I've said this about 8 times now, this has got to be the last flight for the White Arrow. It's got no nose on it. I completely forgot we didn't have nose on it. I also took it over 75, so poor Matthew West there got a little bit of a shock, shall we say, as he started having trouble breathing. I am officially retiring this craft after this flight. I'm also retiring the Farley as well, because I don't think either of them has a future. I'm not going to scrap them. I'm going to keep them in the list of craft, because you know what? They can go in a museum. You can see here the heating on interface with the lower atmosphere is significant. Because of that, I start to worry about what's going on. You'll see we've got a lot of fuel still on board this craft. It's got the capability to go a lot higher. It's just that cockpit is not capable. We could probably strap, and this is the other thing, we're about to unlock the X-15 equivalent cockpit, the suborbital cockpit. So because I was worried about the heating, I actually decided just to deploy the parachutes, because I just could not risk any more heat coming into that craft, and I needed to start cooling it down. So I think that is very much the end of the craft. It's probably the end of the White Arrow for now. So here we are on the launch pad, about to go, and there we go. We are launching the Red Princess 4A, and its cargo, which is Puck, the satellite Puck. So it is the 7th of September 1956. I don't know if the 7th of September is important to anybody. I don't think it's important to anything I can think of from the top of my head, but I'm sure it should be. You can see those. I think it's 16. If you want to stop the video and count, I think it's 16 engines. It might be more. There's many of them. There's lots of them. I can't remember. It might be 15. I don't know. There's a lot of engines on that first stage. I was expecting at least one of them to sort of give up the ghost. It did not, which was quite unbelievable. Our second stage starts. We hot staged that with those 3 engines with a lot of gimbal. Need to control that. And they go as well. And now I will point out we're using Spectre engines here. Spectre engines were originally designed by de Havilland for planes, for use on planes, for rocket planes. Just as the Gamma engines we designed for rockets and we've been using them on planes, the Spectre engines were designed for planes and we're using them on rockets. That's right. We will put some on a plane at some point, I think, because you know, it's only right and proper. These are the early versions. If you actually want to do any research on this, the Spectre engines went through a lot of evolutions, and so these are some of the very early ones, which means they don't have a great burn time and they've not got maximum thrust and things like that. Later on, the Spectre engine for some of them, got a burn time of around 7 minutes, and it would actually use the jet fuel as it was doing it. So there you go, our second stage is finished. We've released our fairing. We're firing some RCS just to keep our forward motion going, our acceleration going, so that we're actually ullaging everything, and then we can fire our final engine. There we go, and you can see our little satellite on the end there. So we're going to call the satellite is called Puck. If anybody knows a little bit of history, they will know that the Black Arrow satellite was actually called Prospero. However, interestingly, it was originally going to be called Puck. It was renamed on the cancellation of the British space program, or the Black Arrow program at the time. And so we've brought that back. It would be called Puck, wouldn't it? The first craft would be called Puck. So there we go. Puck, often referred to as a character from Midsummer Night's Dream. And it plays this in Midsummer Night's Dream in many ways. It is a fairy character from British folklore. So there we go, we're into orbit, which is absolutely superb. So it is the 7th of September 1956, and the UK announces to the world we are in orbit. Can you imagine the images around the world? It's absolutely unbelievable, isn't it? The Americans with all their money, the Russians with all their people, they just couldn't believe it. This tiny little island's done this, and we didn't even launch it from our island. We launched it from Australia. Yes, that's right. We got the kangaroos and the koalas to do it for us. So there we go. This craft has got some control, so it can actually do a little bit of reorientation even, and we can actually refine our orbit a little bit. So this is actually going to try and complete the first science satellite and the first solar satellite task. And the best bit is, this craft, we can actually get rid of the upper stage so that we don't have rubbish everywhere. Isn't that wonderful? Just do a little bit of RCS and pull it out of orbit. Isn't that brilliant? So there we go. We don't leave any rubbish in orbit either. So there we go. There's Puck, a nice close-up of it. Spinning around, you see it's covered in solar panels. It's got a TV camera, so we're sending pictures back of the planet. We've got micrometeorite detector. We've got a Geiger Muller in there. We're getting science. Oh, so much science. Yeah, I don't think we've gone high enough to go through or notice the Van Allen belts, although we are on the near the equator. No, we're not on the equator, are we? We launched from Australia. Anyway, moving on, because we don't want to rest on our laurels. We're going to go for first polar orbit as well. That's right, two orbital launches. So there we go. We're launching again. This is the 5th of December 1956, so it's taken us about 2 months now. We've used some of the money from that first craft to actually increase our build rate, and it's taken us 2 months to build this one, and it is a duplicate. It is pretty much the exact same craft. So we've got the Red Maiden 4A launching this time into a polar orbit, so we're having to go and use a bit more energy to actually go polar. Obviously, because we're in Australia, we're not on the equator, so we've got less sort of energy to lose to stop us going polar. We've shredded away our excess weight from our fairings earlier this time, because we are very much aware that every meter per second we can save is important, because this is probably on the brink, I think. The craft was designed for a standard orbit with a weight bigger than this satellite. However, both Puck and Adina, is what this one is called, Adina, both of them are less than the weight it was designed for. However, going polar takes a lot more energy, not more delta V. So yeah, we'll see. You'll see also I was using Smart SAS for this. because I haven't actually used it, I think, in the whole program, and I just wanted to give it a go. Particularly for the polar launches, it's quite nice to actually control your heading. It just makes it a little easier. I could use MechJeb's power assisted PVG guidance launch system, but I mean, I quite like the manual feel to it, and so I've done quite a lot of launches manually, but I will do a bit with Smart ESS from now on for some of the launches where I want to refine them a little bit. So there we go. We get into orbit beautifully. We release our payload. There we go. Superb. We get all sorts of science stuff going on, and you can see we have a satellite in orbit. So that's 2 of them. 2 satellites in orbit, ending 1956 on a high. The British are there. They're there on their own. They've got 2 things floating around the planet with solar cells, transmitting pictures and science back whenever they go anywhere. Can you imagine what the people in New York City, when they're asked about how they feel, would say? I don't think they'd be the same as when Sputnik went over, but they might be a little confused, don't you? So, until next time, have a great one.